Okay, then, yeah.
Somewhat when you recognize the didactic figure on the part of
The screen. It is shown the Anium Cathedral of the Holy Cross, located on an island in Lake Van in what is now eastern Turkey. I don't know that art historians have interpreted it or bothered even to try. It is part of a continuous narrow frieze, high on an outer wall, probably considered decorative, that it doesn't strike me as decorative. Rather, from a high period of Armenian culture, it is to my mind a perfect, solemn figuration of Gurdjieff's Law of Three. Through this image, I want to greet you all in Mr. Gurdjieff's homeland, and greet also the organizers of the conference and the speakers whom I had the pleasure to meet at the Harvard Gurdjieff conference in December. Permit me to place this talk symbolically in the care of this noble old man who holds two forces in balance, while he himself, tranquil, self-possessed, is the third reconciling force. My topic today is the work and the world. How did G.I. Gurdjieff conceive of the relation of his teaching to the world at large? Have his pupils, founders of institutes, schools, and societies in many parts of the world, understood and fulfilled some part of his vision for the teaching as it relates to society? Or is there much remaining to be understood, much that remains unaccomplished and perhaps cannot be accomplished? Are there inevitable limits? And then, did Gurdjieff have a sociology and a politics? These are academic terms, an uneasy fit where Gurdjieff is concerned, but the questions can still be asked, and there are ways to explore them. It is beyond dispute that he wished to address the world and express this wish both formally in writings and informally in conversation. The teaching was not intended to be monastic, cloistered. Who can forget, once encountered, that he said, "Either I make the world go chick, or the world make me go chick." This, accompanied by the harsh gesture of squashing a louse between thumb and forefinger. He had engaged battle with the degraded world and degraded human beings, subject through and through to the consequences of the organ kunde buffer, dreaming our way toward mediocrity or catastrophe. It was a battle for renewal. His writings express the same breadth of intention. The very first writing, The Heralds of Coming Good, published in 1933, is, as he put it, his first appeal to contemporary humanity, addressed to the whole of contemporary humanity. In another place in that book, he evokes the profit which the planned program of his institute might bring to all humanity and the entire so-called sane thinking world. The vehicle for reaching out to the world would be, again, as he puts it, 18 new sections of the Institute, preceded by clubs of quite a new type, where his writings would be read. One of the principal functions of these clubs, he wrote, should be the rapid organization everywhere among large groups of people of institutes. I hardly need remind you that Gurdjieff's masterpiece, All and Everything, is addressed to humanity at large. Remember especially the aim of the second series, Meetings with Remarkable Men, to acquaint the reader with the material required for a new creation, or, as the French edition puts it, a re-edification, a rebuilding. Gurdjieff knew that his teaching is of world significance, however little recognized in his lifetime. In many respects, the work in practice is a most individual, private search. There are indeed many institutes today in many parts of the world, as Gurdjieff wished, and they are almost without exception quiet. They have scant public-facing activities, lectures, and such. They are dedicated to the growth and refinement of being, of consciousness and conscience among their participants. This generally calls for some decades of work together with other seekers in safe privacy, without calling attention either to the institute as such or to oneself as a pupil of the work. It can seem that this is not so, that the teaching is strictly about individual inner development without reference to the society in which the teaching is situated. Mr. Gurdjieff knew that what he hoped and wished would take time, much time even, as he said to Madame de Salzmann in the last days of his life, and we might add, much privacy. Here then is a first map of the dramatic circumstance we are exploring. On the one hand, the need for long years of work on oneself together with others in a private, discreet manner, and on the other hand, Gurdjieff's intention to influence the world at large, to make a new creation. There is a surprise toward the end of Beelzebub's tales. Mr. Beelzebub, as Gurdjieff sometimes said, has taken us through world upon world of observation, of knowledge at every level of the universe, from the sun absolute to our tormented, foolish world. Such complexity. And then suddenly there is a great simplicity. You will remember that passage. His grandson, Hussein, is deeply saddened, weeping over the fate of us here on earth. Beelzebub responds to him, "Your weeping gives me the assurance that in your future responsible existence, there will be in your common presence those being data which are the foundation of the essence of every bearer of divine reason, and which are even formulated by our common Father in words placed over the chief entrance of the holy planet Purgatory, decreeing the following: only he may enter here who enters into the position of the other results of my labors." You will notice at once that there is no boundary around this divine decree. It encompasses both our fellow human beings and all else created and sustained by the good Lord, creatures of all kinds, butterflies and scorpions, wilderness and agriculture, ocean, rivers and lakes, all. The decree reflects what Gurdjieff elsewhere names the 18th commandment of our common Father: love everything that breathes. The aim, then, of private work on oneself in the company of fellow seekers is not only sustained three-centered self-awareness, already a great and necessary achievement, but something more: awareness of the position of the other results of my labors, and entering in, taking action, perceiving with the whole of oneself how to help if needed, and doing so. How many warnings Gurdjieff put around this possibility in his work with groups. For example, he told a much appreciated young pupil, Lipsey, that he had as yet no ability to help others, and were he to try would only do harm. But later Luke could be of great help to others. It was a matter of time and further work. Gurdjieff would mock our altruistic impulses, mechanical, without basis in the real I. And yet the gate of purgatory makes its demand. We must become able to help with clarity and intensity, born of work on oneself, born of conscious labor and intentional suffering. Another passage in Beelzebub's tales comes to mind. The priest Abdel, whom Beelzebub befriended and trusted as he campaigned to eliminate animal sacrifice on earth, receives rare praise from Beelzebub. Abdul had almost that attitude which should be in all normal three-brain beings of the whole universe. That is to say, he became, as it is said there, compassionate and sensitive toward the beings surrounding him. A true candidate for life on the planet Purgatory. Compassionate and sensitive surely does not mean soft. It means vigilant kindness, judicious readiness. It means maturity. The Gurdjieff teaching in its institutional forms, its institutes, foundations, and society, has no current standing in the world at large to advocate for values and attitudes in a way that could be heard by many. That role, however well or weakly played, falls to globally recognized religious and ethically based entities and to their leaders, to the United Nations, to the larger religious communities, to the Dalai Lama, the outstanding men and women of faith, big heart, and common sense, who speak for significant constituencies, falls also to major newspapers and sources of opinion. At that level, call it institutional, we have no voice. However, we have and over the years have had men and women of recognized excellence, devoted to the teaching, devoted as well to serving their fellow human beings. They enter in without losing themselves. On the contrary, to enter in for them is one of the great exercises, a source of ever-renewed inquiry, learning, and inner growth. Their reach, their beneficent influence, typically enriches a specific domain, not the world as a whole, but a vital, smaller part of the world. The example who comes most readily to mind is a man I respected and loved, the theater and film director Peter Brook, who left us only 3 years ago at the age of 97. In the world of the Gurdjieff teaching, Peter was just Peter, an older comrade, a teacher, one of us. It would have been unthinkable bad taste and unkind to him to ballyhoo him in any way. I so often remarked the ease with which he moved among us, the freedom he earned through his simplicity of attitude to be just Peter, our friend and teacher. And yet, he was arguably the most significant innovator of 20th century theater, and this from an early age, a great and respected name in the world. He taught us how to be extravagantly theatrical through works such as his airborne production of Midsummer Night's Dream and the almost unbearably intense production of the Mara Saad, while in his mid to late years, he taught a bare theater with scarcely any scenery and few props, with only the force of humanity, of voice, gesture, meaning, storytelling. His bare theater in an empty space was all that was needed. Further, he made theater to the end of his life, just as he continued to explore the ways of the Gurdjieff teaching and to speak with us about it to the end of his life. At the present stage of development of the Gurdjieff teaching, Peter Brook exemplifies what it can offer. Men and women of merit, moving through life without ostentation, helping to make things a little better, even much better. However much or little, they are comparable to the Lamed Vav of Jewish tradition, the 36 hidden saints. The Gurdjieff teaching does not now possess an institutional identity that would be the basis for far-reaching, influential statement. But each generation thus far has been fortunate to be graced by a number of the Lamed Vav, both men and women. I look toward Mr. Gurdjieff and report, we are not yet reaching the whole of contemporary humanity with your powerful, beautiful teaching of ideas, practices, movements, community, and oral transmission, perpetually renewed. But there are among us doctors, university teachers, specialists in early education, business executives, architects, artists, designers, and others in many walks of life who carry the teaching within them and bring something of its light to their worlds without publicly self-identifying as pupils of the teaching. They self-identify as human beings. I want to ask whether Gurdjieff had a politics, by which I mean a view of what allows us to live in a polis, in a predominantly peaceful society that belongs to all, and insofar as possible gives opportunities to all. He certainly had a sociology. His objectively impartial critique of the life of man is a strident sociology, in large part a critical revelation of what we are, what we could be, and what stands stubbornly in the way both of individuals and of societies and nations. I'll return briefly to this theme a little later, but for now let's ask, did he have a politics? For the most part, we associate him with adroitly avoiding political situations. He slipped between the cracks during the Caucasian expedition as Bolsheviks and White Army militia and sheer bandits fought for control. He managed to be all things to all armies and continued on unmolested. Something in the same attitude and strategy is evident in his rebuke of his pupil Jane Heap, an American living in London in the 1930s. The discussion concerned the abdication of Edward VIII to marry his American love, Wallis Simpson, a headline scandal at the time. Salida Solano recalls the incident in her notes on those years. She wrote, Mr. Gurdjieff wasn't often concerned by daily news, but in his view a king should remain a king, once a king. Jane Heap was saying that she sometimes forgets to stand up when they played God Save the King. Must remember there is king and stand up, Gurdjieff commented. This is organization, and you must respect it. Outward you must do. Man has two worlds. Outside he must ceremony make like others, but inner world is yours. All man has is inner world, his independent place. There you can tell your king is merde, and be sorry you have such a king. Jane Heap also was to slip between the cracks, to call no nubbis to herself while preserving her independent place. But that is not all we can know of Gurdjieff's politics. In the fall of 1943, when meetings with him were being carefully transcribed, a group member said that he longed to free himself of his obsession with communism as the best formula for social order. Could Gurdjieff help him? And Gurdjieff opened up about this. I'm going to talk a little bit about politics with you, he said. We'll soon hear that he was no admirer of ordinary politics. He could not have been more explicit about that in characteristically robust language, not soon or ever forgotten. But still, there was something he cared for. I know about communism, he said. I also was a communist. There is no education, no authority in communism. They don't recognize it. It's not permitted. Everybody must be equal. If you've noticed in your own life this was impossible, then you'll understand that there it is just as impossible. If you understand that, the communist idea can die in you. It must die if you know something about Ashiara Shiamash. In communism, they choose the teachers, the directors from the herd. Idiots who know nothing at all. They choose only the people who are full of self-love and vanity. The system of Ashiara Shiamash is the opposite of all that. By comparison, other systems are nothing. Communism or monarchy, it's all the same. They choose some idiot with all the same flaws. You understand what I'm saying and why. One is a great idiocy, and the other too. It's the same shit in both cases. A collective existence is only possible through one system, that of Mr. Ashiara Shiamash. Right now, our only concern is the development of candidates to become future followers of Ashiara Shiamash. Later on, we shall choose among them. Do you understand? So far, so good. To my great surprise, and perhaps yours, Gurdjieff did have a politics. We are not yet followers of Ashiara Shiamash, he continued. We're preparing ourselves to be candidates to become followers of Ashiara Shiamash. Your monarchy, your communism, your surrealism all have exactly the same value. All 4, 5, 10, however many exist, it's the same thing, the same smell. It smells like a chicken's ass. The expression does exist. When you buy a chicken, you always sniff it in one place, whether it's old or young. There's one place you sniff, under the tail. That's the way you can tell if it's old or young, if it was killed 5 days, a week, or a month before. That's why you smell it there. All chickens smell the same in that place, but with different qualities. Old, one quality. Young, another quality. But both are mixed with the smell of shit. It's the same with all your political parties. The smell is mixed with the smell of shit. Never forget that its smell is mixed with the smell of shit. Hi, Mr. Gurdjieff. Is that your teaching? All ordinary politics, all existing political systems have the same smell, mixed with the smell of shit? So be it. We can learn that from you. And who among us doesn't already know it in light of the murderous 20th century and the dreadful state of public life today in so many regions of the world? But a collective existence is possible through one system, that of Mr. Ashiara Shiamash. I don't suppose that any of us has thought of the 4 chapters in Beelzebub's Tales on the mission of Ashiara Shiamash, a messenger sent from above, as political narrative. True, the change of life he brought about resulted in the disappearance of class and caste differences, a major cause of resentment and disorder, and also the disappearance of proud nations ever poised to go to war. This is politics and immensely significant social change. But the narrative itself has a different center of gravity, initially a classic tale of spiritual striving. It begins with the profound reflection and voluntary suffering of its hero as he puzzles out how to bring a new wisdom to human beings in whom faith, love, and hope are spoiled, unsuited to any sort of regeneration of peace on earth, goodwill toward men. You will remember that Ashiara Shiamash goes several times to the summit of Mount Vezinyama to bring himself through fasting and spiritual exercise into the state of all-brained, balanced being perceptiveness, in which he could hope to see clearly into the nearly impossible challenge he faced. At last, after tireless sacrifice, he found that he could begin to meditate how to be. And what he found, as you well know, is that there remains in human beings, safely and remotely buried in our subconscious, a factor, conscience, that could be called upon to rework what we are as individuals and as societies. Were it possible to raise from hiding into the daily life of human beings what Ashiaref called divine objective conscience, he might just be able to fulfill the mission assigned him from above, to free human beings from their slavery to the consequences of the organ Kunda buffer. Beelzebub often recites these consequences with a kind of relish, lest we forget: vanity, self-love, pride, conceit, swagger, and so forth, as he would say. The inventory of ingrained destructive traits is all but endless. Were conscience to reappear as an authentic force in our lives, the other sacred impulses, faith, love, hope, might also be in time purified, freed of nonsense, indulgence, and delusion. Time was much on Ashiata's mind. He notes that much steady time would be needed for his plan for us to work out as he so wished, a truth echoed years later by Gurdjieff himself in his last talk with Madame de Salzmann, as we have already heard. The next stage of Ashiata's mission hardly qualifies as politics in the ordinary understanding of the term, but then this is Gurdjieff, committed from an early age to do things not as others do them. Ashiata works discreetly among a very few promising people to begin the dissemination of his teaching on the need for conscience in daily life. He establishes relations with members of the Brotherhood Cheftan Turi, meaning to be or not to be at all, who become his first disciples. Their name, as you will recall, was later changed under his influence to Hichtbori, meaning only he will be called and will become the Son of God who acquires in himself conscience. All of this, all, is about individual, private recognitions and transformation. It has no political character. However, there eventually appears what we might call a political element. Ashiata requires of each of his leading disciples to convince 100 other human beings of the rightness and necessity of this teaching, and they in turn are to convince another 100, and so on. Exponential growth. Gurdjieff writes, the very saintly Ashiata Shirmash obliged everyone striving to become an all the rights possessing brother of the Brotherhood Hichtbori to attain, in addition to all kinds of definite self-merits, the ableness to know how to convince all of the three separate, spiritualized, and associating parts of a further 100 three-brained beings there concerning the divine impulse, conscience. Reading the Ashiata chapters in Beelzebub's Tales, one may question whether our author provides a concrete approach to the recovery of conscience. Does he speak of it without offering specific work on oneself? For some reason, it is easily missed that the 5 being strivings, one of the most vividly remembered passages in the entire book, are precisely that. I won't take time here to cite them, but all students of the Gurdjieff teaching know where to find them, and often reread them. They are fundamental, or potentially so, to practice of the teaching among us now, not only in ancient times. And in that regard, there comes to mind something said by Mr. Gurdjieff to Louise March when she was translating the Ashiata chapters into her native German. He is said to have turned to her and said, "You think was? No, will be." The consequences of what came to be called Ashiata's renewals were many. As his teaching and influence spread, caste and class disappeared. Power possessors voluntarily gave up unmerited privileges. Leaders in society were persons of widely recognized merit, whom it was a privilege to hear and follow. It was an era, so Beelzebub tells us, of bliss. This was Gurdjieff's politics. It begins with a call from above, with individual striving and suffering, with what Gurdjieff calls conscious labor and intentional suffering. It is rooted in a novel, profound understanding of human nature, our limitations and possibilities. It reaches into society discreetly but with purpose, and eventually prevails. It transforms social relations. It draws into leadership individuals who practice the teachings, rather than what Gurdjieff calls idiots who know nothing at all, driven by vanity and conceit. And even among those not directly touched by the central teachings on which all this is based, Ashiata's way is influential. It brings aspiration, common sense, decency, and peace, even from afar. Why then did Mr. Gurdjieff feel compelled to narrate in the last of the 4 chapters what he calls the destruction of all the very saintly labors of Ashiata Shamash? I suppose we must remember that Beelzebub's Tales is his objectively impartial critique of the life of man. Are we to recognize that even the best of things on earth are fragile, easily enough undone by determined adversaries? Is this a call to protect such things, to be courageous on their behalf? That must be so. We aren't told about Lenschow Hamsanen's destruction of Ashiata's labors to acquiesce, to be philosophical, even to say with lofty complacency that such things are lawful, the wheel turns, etc. No. We are to recognize the play of forces, merciless at times. We are to be ruthlessly realistic and clear-eyed. Gurdjieff once said, and perhaps more than once, "I need soldiers who will fight for me and the new world." There are surely many ways to be a soldier. No need to bear arms. Lenschow Hamsanen, his name incorporating the names of both Lenin and Trotsky, is a wealthy, ambitious, attractive young fellow who wanted to make his name in the world. As Beelzebub says, there was no being whatsoever in his presence, and he was entirely under the sway of the organ Kundabuffer of vanity, self-love, swagger, and so forth. As you will recall, he made his play for fame by writing a manifesto on an enormous skin made of the hides of 100 buffaloes, and bringing it to a lush banquet he organized for all the learned beings of his region. No one had ever seen such a thing. It was impressive. There isn't time here or need to think about all of the so-called teachings in the manifesto, but several should be mentioned, especially its opening words, which entirely undercut and deny the possibility of human community of fruitful relations between older and younger, of inspiration and discipleship. Man's greatest happiness, it begins, consists in not being dependent on any other personality whatsoever, and in being free from the influence of any other person, whoever he may be. Where leaders was concerned, the manifesto undercut and denied the natural emergence of truly excellent leaders through Ashiata's way of conscience. Instead, Ventro Hampsonen wrote, our lives must be governed and guided by those whom we ourselves shall elect from our midst. That is, by men only from amongst those who themselves struggle for our daily barley. In other words, the communist ideal, which led in Gurdjieff's direct experience to the destruction of the Russia he knew. Ventro Hampsonen prevailed. People picked sides, some for him, some against. It wasn't long before there erupted civil war and soon war between neighboring regions. The saintly labors of Ashiata Shiamash were obliterated and soon forgotten. There were very different outcomes for the two protagonists in this drama. Ventro Hampsonen became what Beelzebub calls an eternal Hasnamus individual, his highest being body confined to the planet eternal retribution from which there is no exit. And Ashiata Shiamash, that beloved figure, became a common cosmic individual, one of seven, without whose participation even our uni-being common father does not allow himself to actualize anything. The name Ashiata Shiamash, reflecting roots in several languages of the Middle East, means ray of the sun. What a tale. This is how Gurdjieff conveyed what he understood to be true politics. Unattainable? However that may be, the story is now told. Good stories tend to stick in the mind. This one too will persist as a source of disquiet and hope for many generations to come. I can return only briefly to the topic of Gurdjieff's sociology. It is the book itself, nearly the whole of Beelzebub's tales. Its tone is characteristically ironic, often funny and sad at the same time. We could legitimately consider Mullah Nasruddin its chief spokesman. The mullah in Gurdjieff's recension was funny, lucid, disenchanted, a splendid teacher. Remember also the chapter on war, in which Beelzebub recounts that some power-possessing or important beings of the earth suddenly chances to think not under the influence of the reflexes of his stomach and sex organs, but thinks sincerely and quite seriously about means of preventing or minimizing the outbreak of war, whence the League of Nations, and one of Gurdjieff's most brilliant and ironic narratives about its coming and going. Remember also Beelzebub's arch-comic narrative about his presentation to the Tsar, and so much else. Here and there in Gurdjieff's writings there are tranquilities, moments or tales or portraits of his friends that allow us to rest, to feel at peace. Among so much else, Gurdjieff did teach the value of rest by his own example. He too would rest. One such is the beautiful evocation by Father Giovanni of the quality and purpose of life in the world brotherhood to which he belonged in Central Asia. There is understated, scarcely expressed longing in that passage from meetings with remarkable men, longing for goodness of life, for shared search by the light of true teachings. Gurdjieff wrote, Father Giovanni told us a great deal about the inner life of the brethren there and about the principles of daily existence connected with this inner life. And once, speaking of the numerous brotherhoods organized many centuries ago in Asia, he explained to us a little more in detail about this world brotherhood, which any man could enter, irrespective of the religion to which he had formerly belonged. As we later ascertained, among the adepts of this monastery, there were former Christians, Jews, Mohammedans, Buddhists, Lamaists, and even one shamanist. All were united by God, the truth. All the brethren of this monastery lived together in such amity that in spite of the specific traits and properties of the representatives of the different religions, Professor Skridlov and I could never tell to which religion this or that brother had formerly belonged. May we hold in our memory and hold dear the values so evident in this passage. Here and in the extended tale of the labors of Ashiata Shiamash, Gurdjieff evokes the possibility of a world not entirely indifferent to consciousness, to conscience, to the beauty and challenge of work on oneself. As he said, time is limited. We haven't forever to come to our senses. But that time is limited means there still may be time. Can the work and the world listen more closely to each other? Thank you. It is my joy to speak with you.